Football is finally back this week as the Indianapolis Colts host the Miami Dolphins on Sunday. And we're going to tell you all about how this matchup is going to reach its final conclusion. Let's get to it.
You are Locked On NFL Crossover, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
All right. Thank you for tuning in and making us your first listen of the day. This is a collaboration of your daily podcasts covering your Indianapolis Colts and Miami Dolphins, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And of course, with Crossover Thursday returning, it is presented by Prize Picks. Download the Prize Picks app today and use code Locked On NFL to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. Welcome back to our favorite crossover show every week, everybody. I am Jake Arthur of Locked On Colts, joined by Kyle Krabs of Locked On Dolphins, and we are psyched to be back with you here. Of course, Crossover Thursday, it means football is officially back. So today we're going to tell you what we think are going to be the biggest keys to victory for each side of this. What are the biggest matchups that are probably going to be the most influential to the outcome? But first, let's talk about storylines, Kyle. I mean, Colts and Dolphins are two teams who I think nationally people just do not know what to expect.
Yeah,
I know there's both sides really, injuries have already kind of dictated a couple things and have left both sides scrambling a little bit. So tell me about what are kind of the general vibes coming out of Miami right now?
Yeah, I think the national media's painting of Miami is that of a team in disarray, and I haven't necessarily thought that. Now, I do think they have some combustible elements where if this team starts slow, like they did last year when they were 2-6, they're going to have Tyreek Hill probably not very happy, probably willing to make it publicly known that he's not very happy, but he's got he's at that juncture of his contract where he just had an option bonus that was paid out, and it's the next to last guaranteed chunk of money in his contract. So he's out of guaranteed money after 2025, and he's due for $36 million in compensation. Now, the Dolphins aren't going to have an appetite to pay that for Tyreek Hill in what will be, I believe, age 32 season for him. So that contract situation is going to be in flux. It's going to change whether that's in Miami or elsewhere. And I think that's the big thing for the concern about Tyreek Hill. If the season gets off the rails, yeah, you're probably going to be having conversations about the trade deadline. But right now, it's more how big of a volume of workload does Tyreek Hill get after missing with an oblique injury that they were pretty conservative with, target share versus Jalen Waddle, when Tyreek Hill also missed the entirety of the offseason program with offseason wrist surgery. So Jalen Waddle's been the one, all of offseason program, all of minicamp, all of OTAs, the vast majority with the exception of 2 weeks of training camp. What does that look like? What does that target share look like for that team that is also making a concentrated effort to try to be a little bit better running the football and being more balanced after their interior offensive line just proved to be a major crutch that they had to circumvent in every way, shape, and form last year just to try to have a functional offense, and it really sucked out the explosive plays. So I think that element of Miami, of kind of the chemistry balance of the pieces that they have from an X's and O's standpoint, is much more of what feels like we would like to get some answers to, as compared to this team is one bad loss away from driving the car off the edge of the cliff, which seems to be the public perception in the national media.
Yeah, I am personally still very worried about Miami. Like, it was just a couple years ago. To me, it was a team that started really fast. Like Tyreek Hill just shot out of a cannon right away. You've got Waddle, you've got Tyreek Hill. Those guys are still there. You got Devon Achane. It's still a track team. Like, there is every reason in the world to still be very cognizant of what these guys can do. So yeah, I think it's very naive to just overlook Miami at this juncture. I mean, coming off a disappointing season, they've got to prove it, just like the Colts do.
Yep.
But looking at it from a Colts perspective, I don't know if you've heard, but a little change in the quarterback department. We can have the same conversation week one every year if you'd like. But no, we're going into the Daniel Jones era finally. Last year was the first year in years and years, I think 2015 and 16, that there was consecutive same quarterback starting a back-to-back season in week 1 with Anthony Richardson, but now it is Daniel Jones. So what's this offense going to look like with Daniel Jones? I think Shane Steichen is really banking on himself with this. He wants a quarterback that he can trust. I mean, it's not going to always be sexy with Jones, obviously. Like we all know what his Giants career looked like, but he wants a guy that's just going to pull the strings of his offense and do exactly what is expected in the system and in the play calls that Shane throws out there. So what's it going to look like? Is he going to be averse to pushing the ball downfield like we saw with Gardner Minshew in 2023? And is what is kind of the perception of Jones as well from his Giants career? Are they going to lean into the run and then just make it be a play action thing where that's where the big plays come from? So very curious to see what Steichen's vision of a Daniel Jones offense kind of looks like.
Yeah, and I think that was the biggest thing for me with Indianapolis, with Anthony Richardson and the preseason reps and the is he hot, is he not, sack, dislocated pinky thing.
Oh yeah.
That to me really, I thought, spoke volumes about just kind of the understanding of where your eyes need to be based off threats. And you hear a lot of quarterbacks talk about like the weight of responsibility that you have to understand where your pressure threats are and what the answers are to protect yourself. And if that's the difference for Daniel Jones versus Anthony Richardson, then I think that probably makes it a sound decision, even with some of the questions that exist. I'd love to hear your thoughts a little bit more on that decision before we flip over to the other side of the ball, because as somebody on the outside looking in who but is plugged in across the league, that play in particular really spoke a lot of volumes to me about, hey, this is kind of what you have to weigh at with the risk and reward versus Anthony versus we kind of know what we're going to get and we know what our limitations are with Daniel.
Yeah, I do get it. And, to Shane Steichen's credit, he does have a responsibility for the rest of the guys on the roster and especially the offense to have someone out there who can be held responsible for being the quarterback, making sure everyone is in the right spots, identifying pressures where it's coming from and just being able to read a defense pre and post snap. Like that, there is merit to that. I do get it. You're obviously going to have limited upside when it's Jones versus Richardson. But at the same time, you're going into year 3 for Richardson. Like there's still kind of some elementary things that aren't staples of his game so far. And I understand there's been injuries and everything, but at the same time, you're still in the quarterback room. You're still able to observe things on the practice field. Like there's a big onus of this that he's got to take responsibility for where he's at in his development as well. Now, I'm not quite sure if the Colts had a solid plan in place for him. Like, why is he not as far as he needs to be? I think you got to ask Cam Turner, the quarterback coach, like, why isn't this guy, mentally where he at least needs to be? Like, sure, again, injuries have limited what he can do on the field, but again, you got to make sure you have a plan for this guy to know what's going on. So I get that. It's just a little uninspiring that if they were going to go with a veteran option this year and that Richardson was unlikely to be the starter, that Jones is kind of where he landed. There weren't a ton of great options, but I mean, it is what it is. I'm willing to see this through and give it a shot and see what it looks like, because I do think Jones probably has a better layer in him than what we saw in New York. I'm hoping the offensive line for the Colts is a little better. I think the skill position group, by and large, as a whole, is probably better than what he had in New York. So we'll see if he's got another level he can step up to.
Yeah, and I know we want to get to Dolphins offense versus Colts defense from another couple layers. I know there's a familiar face for Dolphins fans that we're going to probably be seeing a lot of playing on the perimeter in this game, and maybe that's, Jake, a good opportunity for us to kind of tee up some of the crucial matchups in this game.
Absolutely. Let's talk about that in just a moment. All right, guys, it's almost the weekend. It's time to look back and crown this week's MVP on Who Delivered, powered by DoorDash. Just like you can win every Saturday with DoorDash Streaks, saving more every time you order. These players delivered when it mattered most. So let's break it all down. Now, the regular season just started, but let's talk about which Colts players delivered in a big way during the preseason. I really like how rookie running back Ulysses Bentley and quarterback Riley Leonard closed out the preseason against the Bengals. Bentley had a pair of touchdowns. Leonard threw for nearly 200 yards in a rout of the Bengals. Might be the most that they score all year. When the pressure was on, those two came through. No hesitation, no delay. And if you've been watching them in the summer, their performances doesn't seem like it was a fluke. And just like Bentley and Leonard delivered for the Colts, DoorDash delivers your Saturdays. With DoorDash Streaks, you save every Saturday that you order, stack it all up all season, and you could save up to $250, including $100 in DoorDash credits. Order this Saturday. Keep the streak alive. Fuel your game day only with DoorDash. Terms apply. Promo period through 11/18. All right, welcome back, everydayers of Locked On Colts and Locked On Dolphins. We are talking this Colts-Dolphins matchup this Sunday. And speaking of matchups, let's get into some kind of individual matchups that have really got us kind of turning things over in our heads a little bit of how this thing is actually going to go. So, Kyle, we talked a lot about the Colts in that opening segment and everything that's going on with Daniel Jones and company there. So I'll turn it back over to you. What when you're looking at this from a Dolphins perspective, what matchups have really got you wondering what's going on?
Yeah, I look at some of the investments that Indy's made in the secondary this year with Cam Bynum as a big add at safety, and then obviously Javarius Ward at one of the corner spots, and Xavien Howard, who will play. He's played 100 career NFL games, all of them with Miami. His 101st will come against Miami in week 1, and he obviously did not play last year. I think some of that was he had a couple of workouts, but from what I understand, Miami owed him a portion of his salary for 2024 was guaranteed. He kind of took the opportunity he got paid for last year, took the year, got himself healthy, probably is banking. I know Lou Anarumo talked about him having fresh legs after being out for 2024. So I think that matchup for Miami is a big one where you heard all kinds of teams played us in too high shells and teams pressed our guys and it limited explosive plays. And I would expect physical players like Javarius Ward and Xavien Howard to maybe try some of that, and what the Dolphins' answer is for that, and structurally what they do with what do they do with shifts and motions to get those guys free releases at the snap. That I think will be a big piece of the puzzle for making sure that you are getting guys uncovering to prevent the Colts pass rushers from testing you, because I think the Dolphins' offensive line is going to be a markedly better group than last year. But I do believe a lot of the strength of those individual players right now lies in the run blocking. So you want to lean into the run game. You want to make sure that you're getting opportunities to have guys that are uncovering early. Who's going to win their matchups individually if the Colts play man, if they play zone? How well are they disguising their zone coverages versus how well are the Dolphins receivers adjusting their route stems versus depth and landmarks of zone defenders to make those available throws for Tua early and often, because obviously that was something we didn't get any gauge of when these two teams played last year, because it was the Tyler Huntley and Tim Boyle efforts and what was one of the ugliest offensive football games that was played last year between these two teams. So here's hoping Daniel Jones and Tua can give us a little something extra into it this year.
Yeah, I was thinking about that matchup last year. I was like, man, we've got a lot more to look forward to in this one for sure. But no, I'm glad you mentioned, Travarius Ward and Xavien Howard. That's definitely one I had as well, because you look at Hill Waddle at speed, where Ward and Howard are not guys where that's necessarily been their calling card. I mean, aggressiveness towards the ball and physicality. I absolutely want to hear from you more about Howard and what we might be able to expect. I know he's been out of football for a year, but I'm curious to see not even just individually them as players, but how Lou Anarumo uses them. Because I think something fresh for Colts fans to look forward to this year is it not necessarily being so reliant on the players, just a player matching up with the guy and having to win that matchup. But they've got kind of a chess player now in Lou Anarumo as their defensive coordinator. He schematically is going to put guys, as far as we can understand, in a lot better position to succeed. So how do they use that? How do they use Cam Bynum as the high safety to kind of shade over the top and and kind of take those deep plays away. So very curious about how they do that.
Yeah, I think it'll be a fun chess match, and I think that's where the Howard signing for who was available for you makes sense because of his previous exposure with Anarumo early in his career with the Dolphins, when Anarumo was a defensive backs coach with Miami when Howard first came into the league. So a lot of that terminology, probably a lot of that disguise ideology is probably stuff that Howard would be much further ahead than a different street free agent veteran corner who hasn't played for Lou Anarumo. So I think that's a big thing in Indy's back pocket here, as Miami kind of looks to probe and figure out how fresh those legs actually are. Is he's going to have the elevated ability to disguise and execute how Anarumo wants to disguise. I think it's a really interesting layer to this game.
Yeah, absolutely. This is kind of a weird one. There's a lot of crossover too, because I mean the Dolphins also brought in Juju Brents, former Colts as well. So another one that really gives me pause as well. There's actually three of the 5 parts of the Colts offensive line I'm pretty curious about. So Tanner Bortolini and Matt Gonzalez, new starters there in the middle of the line. Zach Seiler is a big kind of issue to have to deal with right off the bat. So I'm very curious how those guys are going to handle that. Bortolini I think he's a little further along in his development at center. Matt Gonzalez played a lot of tackle last year, mostly right tackle, is going to be relied on at right guard. Now, in the run game, it's looked pretty good, but so far in the preseason, he's got some catching up to do in development and pass pro. And then on the outside, Braden Smith at right tackle has not had the strongest summer. How much of that is Latu developing and kind of giving it to him each day? But also when the Packers came in, Rashawn Gary had a really good performance in the joint practice. And it's got me just kind of thinking, like, are Braden Smith's best days behind him, or what's this going to look like? So which edge is mostly going to be lined? Is it Chop Robinson that's kind of from the defense's left side?
Yeah, it would be Jalen Phillips and Chop Robinson are more likely to platoon on that side. And those are the 2 speed elements. They both have explosive twitch, speed to power elements, where Bradley Chubb and Matthew Judon, who the Dolphins signed in free agency, is most likely going to spend most of their time on the defensive right, where both of those guys kind of play with heavy hands, collapsing and pushing the pocket. And that's not to say that the guys on the defensive left can't create push and bull rush, but their hauling cards and hallmark traits is the twitch and the explosiveness that they have. So I would expect to see Chop Robinson and Jalen Phillips platooning on that left side, kind of challenging and testing Braden Smith.
Yeah, I certainly think that's probably where the biggest challenges lie for the Colts offensive line. I think in general, it should be a pretty good group this year, but I think it's a good barometer right off the bat to see how much patience we might need to see with that group this year.
Yeah, and from Miami's perspective with that group, they are really excited about the front, where they invested their first-round pick in Kenneth Grant to go with Sealer on the interior, who got a contract extension. Anthony Weaver, they like running a lot of simulated pressures where they'll drop the guys off the edge and bring untraditional rushes, whether that's an inside backer or a nickel or a safety. But last year it was like Emmanuel Agba was trying to do zone drops and take the flat when they were running zone pressure. So you could feel it really limited when they wanted to try to test, if they want to try to test the interior with the Colts with the 2 new starters this year that are younger guys with, hey, we're going to bring an untraditional rusher from depth, and we think the center, based off where we put the defensive tackle, is going to turn this way, but then we're going to outnumber them to whatever opposite way the center turns. I think they have a better chance to do that this year because of the guys on the edge and their ability to play in space, where Bradley Chubb was doing that back in Denver. And then he did it with Fangio in 23, where Chubb didn't play at all last year and Jalen Phillips played 3.5 games. And I think they're very excited about getting that group back out on the field, because Chubb and Phillips have not been on the field together since Black Friday in 2023. And then you obviously have the Chop Robinson element on top of that. I think that's one of the areas they're expecting to do a lot of heavy lifting for their defense this year. And I think right now a lot of Dolphins fans are just relishing in the fact that they're going to have them all dressing on game day, because it's been a long time.
Yeah, no, this front for Miami is definitely one that, as I looked more into it throughout the week, I was like, man, this is it's going to be kind of a tough group to go against. Like, I feel like nationally there's not like the strongest perception of that front, but it's legit. So that's actually going to lead me into my next point when we're talking about these biggest keys to victory. All right, guys. So hopefully so far you've learned a little bit about either side of this matchup. But now we're going to talk about what are the most crucial keys to victory. How is either side going to come out victorious? Mazda crafts cars for those who choose to do more than simply move. They follow what moves them every time they drive, and that's what makes Mazda stand out. They go beyond safety, style, and performance to deliver a driving experience that feels alive in every detail. You can feel it the moment you get behind the wheel, the smooth handling, intuitive controls, and standard all-wheel drive in every crossover SUV. Whether it's a quick drive to practice or a weekend road trip, Mazda makes even every drive feel special. It's the small details that make the big plays, and just like there's more to every player, there's more to a Mazda vehicle. Mazda, move and be moved. And guys, this NFL season is finally here. We've got football on Thursday, and FanDuel is making sure that you're ready for kickoff with a can't-miss offer. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. Personally, I love using FanDuel because it fits however you like to bet. Player props, building a same-game parlay, or even just jumping in as the live action unfolds. It just makes every game day more exciting, whether you're watching your team or just keeping an eye on your fantasy lineup. If you don't have a dog in the fight, it helps kind of raise the stakes for you and make your excitement a little more. It's quick, easy, and the best way to add a little more energy to your Sundays. So, are you ready to play? Download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com to place your first $5 bet. All right, Kyle, welcome back. Welcome back, everydayers. So let's talk about what is going to matter the most in whether the Colts or the Dolphins are going to come out of this matchup with a shiny new 1-0 record. Kyle, what do you think? What do the Dolphins got to do to win this one?
Yeah, I'll start with avoiding giving up excessive yards after contact. And this goes back to the last couple of times that the Dolphins have played the Colts, but even last year as a team, they were top 10 in yardage allowed against the run before contact and dead last in the NFL in yardage allowed after contact and running plays. So they couldn't tackle anybody. And that's why you see a lot of attention to your defensive interior for when guys are running between the tackles in piles and guys that can deconstruct blocks a little cleaner, guys that are a little bit squattier. You really saw them embrace the linebacker depth where it was David Long got cut midseason and Anthony Walker took the starting spot. He's back in Indy. So he just came back for the Colts. But they added Willie Gay and KJ Britt as two linebackers to go with Tyrell Dotson and Jordan Brooks as the starters. They completely remade the safety room from top to bottom. Like the whole thing was out. Javon Holland, Jordan Poyer. It was a group that desperately up the middle needed attention, and they invested a lot in it, even if it wasn't a lot of premium assets. They made wholesale changes, and they need to be able to tackle better. I think that's the first thing, especially because I think that gets them into a game script in which they can lean on that pass rush we just talked about, really attacking Daniel Jones and that 3/5 of that Colts offensive line that you have some questions about. I think on the offensive side for Miami, the big key to the game is going to be making sure that you stay balanced on early downs. This was a team last year that could not run the ball with consistency. They have their projected starting five. You could count on one hand in the Mike McDaniel era the number of games that they've played with the projected starting five going into the season where they actually had it. Like it just has not existed between Taron Armstead and Austin Jackson and Isaiah Wynn. It's been brutal as far as the Dolphins in that standpoint. And they bring in Ollie Gordon as a bigger, more powerful back who had a great preseason. I'm really interested to see how willing the Dolphins are to be disciplined with Mike McDaniel to run on early downs with a player that can fall forward and try to keep you out of 2nd and 11, which the Dolphins saw way too often last year. And then I'll give a special teams element here where I'm really interested in how they're going to choose to strategize the kicking game with the kickoffs, where Jason Sanders is on short-term IR. So they're going to be elevating kicker Riley Patterson off the practice squad for the first 3 weeks of the season and evaluating him while they're figuring out how long Jason Sanders' rehab looks like, if they need to open up a 53 spot. So these new kickoff rules, if you just put it out of the back of the end zone, you're giving up a lot of field position to start on the 35. If you fail to execute the kick, they're starting on the 40. Do they have Jake Bailey do it? Does Riley Patterson do it? What's their strategy? They have a new special teams coordinator this year in Craig Aukerman after a really awful tenure with Danny Crossman, who'd held the position since 2019. It looked really good throughout the preseason, but now you have the extra layer of, hey, your kicker's out. That's the guy that executes all your kickoffs where this new field position battle could start to take place. So those are the three keys for me. Tackle a lot better than you did in 2024. Be a lot more committed to being balanced on early downs and push the right buttons with what you have at your disposal to not lose the field position battle game from the jump because you're missing your starting kicker.
Yeah, that kicking game part of it, that aspect is actually, it's a really good point. We were talking to Colts special teams coordinator Brian Mason yesterday, and he's been kind of turning over all summer, like what he thinks other teams are going to do. He thinks there's going to be a lot of kind of like flub kicks and like kicking it short just to get the play active as soon as possible to close the gap and kind of get the returner pinned back as far back as possible. So yeah, when we're talking about the Colts, again, I had mentioned, what does a Shane Steichen, Daniel Jones offense look like? I know the Colts are going to want to try and run the ball. You had mentioned Miami struggled to bring guys down, lots of yards after contact, yards after the catch. I think that's what the Colts are going to try and generate throughout the year. Tyler Warren and Josh Downs, probably an extension of their run game and using those guys to create yards after the catch like they do so well. But obviously Jonathan Taylor is going to be the engine to the whole thing this year. 1,400 yards despite missing 3 games last year. I think they're going to just give him the ball as much as they can. Now, the key to it is they can't just bail on it if it's not working, because Steichen does kind of have that tendency where if something's not working, he'll just kind of yank the cord on it and then try and force whatever else is going. And it kind of makes them one-dimensional at times. So would love to see them run the ball, because I think that's the most likely avenue for Daniel Jones to actually take a deep shot, is to get Miami's front to buy in to the run, sell out a little bit, and then just maybe get Alec Pierce involved earlier than the fourth quarter, which is something that we didn't see a lot of. The guy led the league in yards per catch last year, but he was so seldom used until late in the game when they really needed it. So what does that look like? Try to establish the run. Obviously, Jones, I'm very a little concerned about the pass rush. We'll see how that looks. But then as far as the defensive side of the ball for the Colts, my perception of Miami is they're very good at the timing of things. When it's working well, to is getting rid of the ball quickly, and the pass rush is just going to have to get home and kind of mess that timing up a little bit. 2 years ago, the Colts were great there. They had an Indy era record of sacks over 50. They were near the top. They were in the top 5 of the league, but last year came down to earth. They're more bottom 5. So they're going to be very dependent on Latu kind of taking a leap, because the rest of their pass rushers are just kind of guys outside of DeForest Buckner who can provide some interior push. Latu's going to have to be that guy that's threatening the backfield consistently throughout the game. Make it a little more difficult, disrupt that timing for Miami, because that's going to be huge. And then I think they're going to have one playmaker that steps up and matches the energy that Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle and Achane bring. You're going to have Jonathan Taylor either having a signature game, or Tyler Warren just really wearing down those defenders and making it just unfun to have to cover him and bring him down every single play. Because it already does look like he's going to be a significant part of this offense, even as a rookie. Or like I mentioned, Josh Downs. You have a guy like Daniel Jones, who's obviously, his yards per attempt is always going to be lower, regardless of what's around him. I think Downs is going to feast in this offense with Jones specifically at quarterback. They're going to have to create those yards after catch, I think, in order for this to really work and sustain that offense a little bit. All right, guys. So I think that is it for us. That is how this game is going to be won. Stay tuned to Friday to see how we actually think this game will turn out. on either show. Stick with us, Locked On Colts and Locked On Dolphins, throughout the week. And a little network programming note here. Last week, you got the AFC South and AFC East previews, and it's not too late to binge every Locked On division preview. Be the most informed NFL fan in an 8-episode series, bringing you every division winner, breakout star, and Super Bowl contender. Find the link in the description for the Locked On NFL playlist on YouTube. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And again, we want to thank you guys for being with us today. We look forward to bringing you more content throughout the week, leading you up to game time. If you don't already, be sure to follow us on social media at Jake Arthur NFL and at Kyle Krabs, and subscribe on YouTube to both shows and wherever you listen to podcasts as well. With that, you guys have an awesome day, and we'll see you guys tomorrow.